So today, we're doing something a little different. We're not just looking at a biography. Instead, we're diving into what's been framed as a psychological user manual, an attempt to, reverse engineer the mind of one of the most talked about leaders of our time, Donald Trump.
Everything really kicks off with this one quote from back at the 2016 Republican National Convention: "I alone can fix it." According to the analysis we're exploring today, that single sentence isn't just a soundbite, it's the entire puzzle.
You have to ask, right? What kind of mindset, what kind of life experience leads a person to stand in front of millions and say not, "We can fix it," but "I can fix it"? And not just that, but "I alone." That question is the engine driving this entire psychological breakdown.
So, to get an answer, the book we're looking at lays out a really specific method. It frames its whole investigation less as a political take and more like a clinical deep dive. The goal is to build a kind of user manual, for understanding and even predicting behavior. And the main tool for this is something the author calls psychological archaeology. Think of it like this. You start with the person we see today and just start digging backwards, layer by layer, from their adult actions all the way down to the bedrock of their childhood. It's all about tracing the effect back to find the cause.
Now, the author is super clear about one thing and repeats it almost like a mantra. Understanding is not excusing. The whole point of this exercise, according to the book, isn't to judge. It's to analyze the patterns of the past so you can get a better handle on what's coming next.
Okay, so let's start the dig. We're going to layer one. This is the deepest, most foundational layer, and the book calls it the wounds. These are the core traumas from childhood that, it argues, basically set the whole personality into motion.
The analysis points to three major formative wounds. It all starts when he was just 2.5, when his mother suddenly vanished from his life for a long time because of a medical emergency. Then there was a childhood spent with a father who, reportedly, demanded his sons be killers. And finally, as a young man, he watched his own older brother, Fred Jr., spiral and ultimately be destroyed.
But out of those three, the analysis really zeroes in on that first one. From a developmental psychology standpoint, for your mother to just disappear at that critical age, it's a catastrophe. The book argues this created a deep, foundational wound of emotional neglect, a lesson learned very early on that the world is not a safe place and you can't rely on others to meet your needs.
So if you've got these deep wounds, how do you deal with them? Well, that takes us up to layer 2, the formation. This is where the book says the public persona, the one we all know, was built, almost like a suit of psychological armor.
A huge part of this armor was the myth of the self-made man. You've heard the story, right? A small loan of $1 million? But the book puts that story right next to a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation from the New York Times. Their reporting found he actually got at least $413 million from his dad, often, as the paper put it, through questionable tax schemes.
And then there was this key mentor figure, the notorious lawyer Roy Cohen. The book argues that Trump basically downloaded Cohen's personal playbook and made it his own. The rules were simple. 1, never, ever admit defeat. 2, if someone hits you, hit back right away, and twice as hard. And 3, it doesn't matter what the facts are, you always claim you won.
All right, so you've got the wounds at the bottom and the formation built on top of them. That brings us to layer 3, the patterns. This is where those coping mechanisms stop being choices and harden into automatic, predictable behaviors. The book actually calls them psychological algorithms.
Okay, so the first algorithm is called the vengeance algorithm. And according to this analysis, it runs like a simple 3-step program. Step 1, any criticism, no matter how small, is felt as a massive existential attack. Step 2, that attack, or slight, is logged into memory forever. There's no statute of limitations. And Step 3, the revenge, when it comes, has to be completely overwhelming, designed to cause the most damage possible.
Another one of these core patterns is called the loyalty trap. Here's how it's said to work. It starts with a test. You demand someone who works for you does something for you, maybe lie publicly or go against their own interests. If they do it, the demands get bigger and bigger. But according to this model, the final step is always the same. As soon as that person isn't useful anymore, they're just discarded.
And this pattern-based behavior, the book says, also shows up in his relationship with the truth itself. It points to the fact-checker database from the Washington Post, which, as you can see, cataloged 30,573 false or misleading claims during his 4 years in office.
The book argues that when these rigid patterns smash into institutions like the legal system, there are huge, real-world consequences. Take this number, for example. Over $443 million. That's the combined total from the New York civil fraud case and the E. Jean Carroll defamation judgments, cases where his version of reality was pretty soundly rejected in court.
And so, all of this, the digging, the layers, the analysis, it all leads us to the final chapter. And this, the author argues, is the whole point of the exercise, to use this psychological model of wounds, formations, and patterns to make some solid predictions about what might happen next.
So based on those patterns we just walked through, the book forecasts 3 main phases for a potential second term. First up, a retribution phase, where that vengeance algorithm is applied to a long list of enemies. Second, a loyalist administration, where the loyalty trap becomes the primary tool for staffing the entire government. And finally, a consolidation phase, which would be aimed at weakening any institution, like the courts or the press, that could act as a check on power.
Which brings us right back to where we started, with the book's fundamental idea. It makes the case that by digging through these psychological layers, from a childhood wound to a leader's fixed patterns, you can get past simple moral judgments, and you can arrive at something the author claims is way more useful, a framework for actually predicting what comes next.